Hello and welcome back to the channel. I am so excited to see you today, to have you join me. I am going to be talking about your very first prenatal visit. We are going to cover what you can expect during that visit, a few questions you might want to be mindful to ask during that visit, and also how to prepare for that visit. So, if you are pregnant, if this is your very first pregnancy, if you will be scheduling your first prenatal visit soon, then you are in the right place, and I'm so glad you're here. If this is the very first time that you're catching one of my lives, or you might be watching the replay, my name is Stephanie Poole. I am a certified doula and lactation consultant. I specialize in helping first-time moms transition into motherhood by teaching them how to prepare for birth and breastfeeding so that they do it with confidence. If that sounds like something that you are interested in, then be sure to subscribe and become part of the Birth Prep Academy family, because why not, right? All right. Without further ado, you guys know I like to jump in and hit it, which means that I want to start by talking about this prenatal visit, the very first one. So what has likely taken place up until this point? You likely missed a period, or maybe you were feeling a little bit off, not like yourself, not your typical self. Maybe you have experienced a few symptoms, right? Something happened to get your mind to thinking, I might be pregnant. And what has happened up until this point is that you've probably taken some sort of home pregnancy test and it has come up positive. And so now your first appointment has been scheduled and you'll be visiting the office soon, and you're probably curious, what will that look like? What kind of experience will that be? And so I'm excited to be able to kind of explain a few things, to be able to kind of go over a few things with you. If you have any questions, please put them in the comment box, and I'm happy to answer them at the end. I will be doing so. The very first thing that I want to try and describe is what you can expect when you get to your office. Now, of course, this is going to vary because it kind of depends on where you are and type of birth you have, the kind of provider that you select, right? Will you be birthing with a midwife, or are you going to go with an OBGYN? Are you birthing in the United States or somewhere globally? All of those are things that it's kind of going to add certain nuances to this particular visit that I'm going to explain, but it will give you some sort of broad context that you can kind of keep in mind as far as what to expect. So, and I have my trusty notes here, so you know I'm going to be going back and forth. Don't forget, put your your comments in the description box, and I'm happy to answer. So, this visit is a lot like a lot of other visits, right? When you go to the doctor, one of the first things they're going to do is take a medical history on you. They are likely going to ask questions about, when was your last cycle, and is this a planned pregnancy? They will likely ask you, was this a natural conception, or were there any procedures that were used to help you to conceive? So they'll be taking all of that history on top of whatever medical history that you might have. Do you have any underlying medical conditions that, could play a part in your pregnancy, right? And so they're going to be doing that. A lot of doctors will like to take some blood work initially, and they like to be able to from that blood work, there's a hormone called HCG, and that HCG is your pregnancy hormone, right? It helps to support the pregnancy. You need that hormone to continue to grow in volume. And so a lot of times the doctors will take blood work, and they like to see what your levels are based on your anticipated gestation, right? Because they like to see that level growing and getting stronger and stronger and stronger to help them understand whether or not this is the baby's healthy, the pregnancy's viable, and all sorts of things like that. So they'll likely take blood work as well. Now, when it comes to ultrasounds, you may or may not get an ultrasound at your first appointment. And that really depends on, first of all, your gestation and also your provider. So based on where you go and what your gestation is, they might say, okay, you're far enough along where we're going to go ahead and get an ultrasound for the baby. They might do an ultrasound if they are suspecting that for any reason you might be high risk. So if
Keep it at 100. I can buy me one of those. Promise. Oh,
for them to go ahead and do an ultrasound there as well. So just don't be alarmed if you don't get the ultrasound, but you may or may not get one at your first visit based on your medical history and things like that. So I want you to be mindful of that. Another thing that they might actually go over is your pregnancy timeline. So someone in the office, it might be your actual provider or it could be their nurse, that will kind of take you through a couple things that you can expect, especially if you're in that first trimester phase, right? Some women, most women find out that they're pregnant during the first trimester, but there are some that just simply don't know until they're further in the pregnancy. And so their first prenatal visit may look a little different. But for the most part, if you're in your first trimester, anywhere from week 6 to week 8 or 12, this is what the appointment will likely look like. They will get the blood work. They will do that ultrasound that we talked about, possibly, right? Depending on your medical history. And they'll do a medical history and take in if there's any underlying issues concerning you or the baby, and also get a full picture of your pregnancy and conception. So that is overall what you can expect. As far as a few things that they will likely do, they'll likely get a urine sample as well. That just popped in my head. That's very standard. That will tell them a lot as well too. So just keep that in mind. Now, with that being said, I'm going to now pivot into, a few questions that you might want to keep in mind to ask your provider. Let me just pause and say, and I said this in another video, when you are pregnant, right, especially as a first-time mom, you are going to need to have good people around you. You're going to have to build a birth team that is solid. And the reason why is because you are vulnerable at that stage. You are entrusting your body and your baby to this birth team that you are building around you. One way to really have that sense, that comforting feeling, that sense of empowerment, is to do your research and to find the provider that aligns well with your birth preferences. Because once you start having those appointments, it's important to really engage with them, ask the questions, and garner that rapport that is going to be necessary for you to grow throughout that pregnancy, having a complete understanding of what's going on with you medically and what's going on with your baby. That's going to be important. And so to start that conversation off, you might be wondering, well, what are some things that I should even be asking? I'm glad you asked because I have a list here. So the first thing I want you to discuss with your provider is going to be the type of supplements they want you to take. And by supplements, I'm talking about like a prenatal vitamin. And based on your lab and your medical history, they might add some other kind of supplement. What do I mean by that? I mean, you're going to ask them what prenatal vitamin do they recommend? What do they feel is best? Sometimes it is something over the counter, sometimes it's an actual script, but based on what they provide, it's important to get their viewpoint on it, right? Because, and here's a scenario, if you are known to be anemic, right? Maybe you have low iron, and that's just something you have even not when you're not pregnant, then your provider will know that, right? And by you discussing these supplements, you guys can settle on a prenatal vitamin that will support you and the baby and one that carries iron, right? You're going to need that throughout the pregnancy. And these are things that you want to discuss with your provider. Maybe you want to discuss with them when I talk about supplements, not just a prenatal vitamin, not just something for low iron if you are, you happen to be anemic or you have low iron, but also calcium. Calcium is very important when you're pregnant because that baby is building bones. Everything that they are using to build their body comes from the support of your body. And so you have to be very well fueled, right? You need your supplements to be top tier. That is one of the questions that I want you to ask your physician. What supplements should I be taking? What kind of prenatal vitamin do you recommend for me to start? And before your first appointment, you can grab one off the shelf and then adjust it at your first appointment. So the moment you find out you're pregnant, even before you're pregnant, you should be taking a prenatal vitamin. You can get those at the regular pharmacy. But once you go to your first prenatal visit, take that bottle with you, have your provider review it and say, is this okay? This is the best one I found on the shelf. Or is there one that you would recommend or prescribe based on my medical history? And whatever your medical history is, they're going to say, yes, I want you to keep what you've been taking. Or they'll say, that one's good, but I have one over here that will support your low iron, or that will support a little bit more calcium. I'd like to see those levels to be up for you. So that is essentially how I want you to think about this as you are talking about that first pregnancy visit. Another question I want you to ask is pertaining to your symptoms. So, you've been pregnant, you've confirmed with a home pregnancy test, and now you're at your first doctor's visit. During this time, you're experiencing certain symptoms, right? You've been you've had nausea, you have been extremely tired, your breasts have been really tender, and out of all of those symptoms, there may be one that is very concerning for you, right? Maybe the nausea is so much and it's not just lasting for, a few hours in the morning or a few hours at night. It's all day, and it's to the point where you're having problems with your daily activities. These are things that you want to bring up in your first visit. These are things that you want to discuss with your provider so that you can try and get a flow, right? Because there are certain things that they may be able to recommend or prescribe to help alleviate some of those symptoms, to take the edge off. So, there is a condition where some women have really, really bad nausea and vomiting in the first trimester, sometimes even into the second trimester. For those women, doctors are able to prescribe something to help so that they're at least able to do their daily activities, right? So these are things that you always want to be mindful of when you're at the doctor to try and remember to go over. The last one I'll say that I want you to pay attention to when it's time to talk to your doctor is just simply like set the expectation of when would you like to see me back? What is the schedule? What is your pregnancy schedule? Again, it's going to vary depending on the doctor that you choose, the location, meaning if you're in the United States or abroad. So it will vary, but you need to have a certain expectation of what that schedule looks like. It helps you to be prepared. It also helps you as we roll into the next topic that I want to discuss, which is how to prepare for the visit. And one of the ways that you could prepare is by taking someone with you. Well, if you know that timeline of, how often they expect to see you back at the doctor, because okay, so let's say you ask, right? His response or her response may be, okay, we see you at 12 weeks, we see you at 4 weeks, we see you at 8 weeks, we see you at 12 weeks, and then we'll see you back again at 16 weeks. Then these are all intervals where I want to reach out to someone to have to assist me at my appointment. And it's always good to have an extra person. So when you talk about preparing for the visit, prepare to have someone accompany you or go with you to the appointment. Not that you necessarily need them to drive or need them to do anything or, lift anything for you for the appointment, but just it's so helpful to have a second set of eyes. It's so helpful to have someone there that might remember to ask a question that you forgot to ask, or to pay attention to the nuances because, while the doctor's talking, a nurse may be trying to draw blood or take your blood pressure. And so that person can really focus to say, oh, I remember they were doing that, but I remember the doctor saying X, Y, and Z during that time. So try to bring someone when we talk about preparing for the visit. Also, write things down in advance. All of these questions, and after after we finish this live and you sit down with a notepad, I want you to write out not just the questions that I suggested that you ask, but any other questions that you might have, especially as it pertains to your medical history, because they will be able to answer those questions for you. And also, it helps you to be succinct. So working in the medical field, one thing I know is that time is money and money is time. So for doctors and for midwives, they have other patients. And if that time is limited, you want to be succinct. You want to make sure that all your questions are getting answered. So it's important that you write them down before your visit so that you can remember to bring certain things up. How many times have you gone to the grocery store, if you're like me, and you get there and then you get home and you forget a particular item because it wasn't written down or you forgot to, to think of it in the moment? You don't want that to happen. Write all of your concerns and questions down before your appointment. So while you're there, you can be sure to get everything answered. The last thing I will bring up is to bring your list of medications. Any medications, supplements, or treatments that you are currently doing, or you started before you were pregnant. Now you're at your first prenatal visit. You want to make sure you let them know what those medications are. Maybe you are taking something for blood pressure, or maybe you're taking something for depression, or maybe you're taking something for, I don't know, anxiety or blood sugar or cholesterol or whatever the case may be. You need to make sure you bring those medications or a list of those medications and their dosages to your appointment. Why? Because now that you're pregnant, you need to make sure that these medications that you have been taking are pregnancy safe, that they are not going to cause harm to your baby. That's very, important. So that is definitely one of the key takeaways I want you to remember from this live. Make sure that any treatments, any supplements, or any medications that you started taking before you were pregnant, that's necessary to, support your health and well-being, that they are discussed with your doctor at your first appointment. Why? Because your doctor can determine if these are pregnancy safe. And if they're not, they oftentimes can switch out to an alternative that is safe. Or they can put you on a regimen and tell you we need to discontinue this until X, Y, and Z. So you definitely want to talk things over with your provider, because your baby's life may very well depend on it. You want to make sure that you are optimizing their growth and development while they are in utero from very early on. And so asking about medications and supplements is absolutely key. So just as a brief recap, the three things I want you to remember, the three areas that we covered is what you can expect during the visit, right? Which we talked about in detail, including medical history, blood work. You may or may not have an ultrasound. Also, I want you to ask questions. Some of the questions that we talked about is, what kind of prenatal vitamin should I take? Are my symptoms normal? You're going to ask all of these questions, and every other question that you think of, even after this live, you're going to write it down so you can ask at your appointment. The third thing we talked about is how to prepare for the appointment, which we talked about includes taking someone with you that can support you and help to take in that information, to ask questions, and to help to advocate for you, right, at your appointments. Not just the first one, but ongoing throughout your pregnancy. Also, ask questions. Take your medical history, your medications, take them with you to the appointment so that you can know and rest assured that as you're taking your, medication, that it is pregnancy safe because you've discussed it with your provider. Those are all super important. I hope that you were able to grab something out of today's live. And as a matter of fact, I want to know, what's your biggest takeaway from this live? What will you be sure to do at your first appointment after listening today? I would really like to know. If you've already had a first visit, drop something that would be helpful for another mom that it might be her first time. We're a community here, and I like for us to share and to be a family. So if you've already had your first visit and you feel like there's something that you want to share with the other moms in the group, make sure you put it in the comments, please. It's so helpful, and I know a lot of people love to be able to read that and get another mom's perspective. So there's that. Thank you so much for joining me today. I do have two ways that you can work with me personally. They are linked in the description box below. I also have some free resources for you available. How to pack your hospital bag. There's a whole checklist there. Check in the description box for those goodies as well. I absolutely love spending this time with you. Thank you so much for joining me. And until the next video, happy birthday. Bye, guys.